Dave Zumpano joining us, usually in studio. Dave Zumpano from the Estate Planning Law Center. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning, Dave.
Good morning, gentlemen. How are you all this morning?
Not bad. Where are you? White Sands? What are you looking at, Dave?
No, I'm here in central New York.
All right.
I'm just scrambling.
Yeah, it's all right. It's all right. I was just we were wondering if you were enjoying sunnier space somewhere else at this point. But I know you like to do that. I'm not sure if there are any changes for you this year, as Mark was just mentioning with his plans.
Well, I just got back several weeks ago, and I had to do my 2 weeks of prison sentence.
Yeah. Fun, always
it's interesting.
Yeah, always fun. Things we should know about as we start to. It's happening quick. Boy, this month flew by. We're rounding out the end of the year here, but things we should know when it comes to estate planning, Dave.
Well, a couple things. I was thinking about this whole corona, insanity, and estate planning, and the phrase that comes to mind to me is, if you're not planning now, when would you plan? Meaning, if you knew there was a chance you could be in a car accident that could seriously injure you, would you prepare for that? How many people, when they know they're going on a vacation, they go, oh my gosh, I better get my estate planning done because it's the first time I'm leaving the kids behind. Mm-hmm. So if you knew something was potentially could hurt you, that's usually when people plan to get it done. So this coronavirus has really reminded people, well, this is something, it's one of the many things that can affect us. And if we don't plan now, when would we plan? So I think it's a great reminder of all the unseen things. This thing came out of nowhere.
What better time than now to panic during a pandemic, Dave?
Right. Well,
I'm not saying
there's a little bit of a lull here where we're all kind of getting along and figuring it out. And I think those are the opportunities in life. It's kind of like, well, I better get my brakes fixed. Those are the opportunities in life to prepare ourselves. And, we forget what estate planning is really about. A lot of people, believe it or not, don't want to think about it. They don't want to think about death. They don't want to think about disability. And a lot of people think estate planning is about me, that I have to get my estate plan done. And that is part of it. That's about half of it. It is about making sure that if something happened, whether it's the pandemic, whether it's a car accident, whether it's a heart attack, stroke, or anything else that, you read about in the paper every day, or everyone that's listening to me today has had someone in their life who has had something happen unexpectedly. And estate planning is really about, okay, if that happens, who's in control and who gets the benefit during these different times in my life. So while I'm alive and well, who's in control? Me. I am. Who gets to benefit? Me and whoever I say. Mm-hmm. When I'm alive and well.
And Dave, I think that's a great point when you think about what we've all been going through with this pandemic and the coronavirus, and we think about control, and a lot of us, we've had to step back and say, well, there are times where we may feel like we're in control, or we've taken for granted the ability to go see mom or dad, or hang out, or spend time with a loved one. So maybe the control that we feel that we have in certain areas isn't necessarily a reality, when in the reality is that there are other places that you just mentioned that we can plan for, I guess, and maybe have some comfort in the fact that knowing if something does happen, if we do have to take control of a situation, that we've planned for it. And I think that those are some of the reality checks that all of us have been going through. When you can't see a loved one that you've been caring for maybe for weeks, and I know you've talked about this as well, but mom and dad or a loved one in a nursing home, I think those things really start to hit home to say, what if, a lot of what ifs.
That's a great point. So to highlight that, so let's really talk about what this is all about. So people, I'm not going to go political, but there's an election coming up, right? And there are people, on two sides of a fence, and they both got their guns loaded, whatever their guns may be. And, one of the things is you actually do have a choice in this. And the reality is this: when something happens to you, one of two things is going to happen. You will have a plan that says what you want to have happen, or the government has a plan that says what's going to happen. And so what this really comes down to is your right to really define what you want to have happen within the rules of the law, of course, but there's a tremendous amount of discretion that is allowed individuals when they do their own planning. Whereas if you're kind of stuck with the government's rules and the way they do it, it's much more burdensome to your family. Mm-hmm. And that's the other half of the people you're planning for. The first half is for you to make sure your needs are met. The other half is for your family so you don't become a tremendous burden to them. And they have, we always talk about the morbid scavenger hunt. Mom and dad has passed away unexpectedly and the kids have to go through all their papers. There's nothing more disturbing for the kids than going through all the parents' papers because the lawyers are saying, hey, I got to know if they've got this, I've got to know if they've got that. So proper planning will get that all kind of in order and make it, neat and clean for your loved ones and minimize the risk to them. And that's really a great point because control, we do have the right. How many times do we you don't appreciate something until it's gone, kind of. If
right,
you will.
Right.
And I can tell you, coming back from travel and having to quarantine 2 weeks, I got to tell you, that was a very uncomfortable feeling.
Yeah.
That it's almost like a house arrest.
Yeah.
And, it's uncomfortable. And that's what happens when something happens to you and you don't have proper planning. It's very uncomfortable for your family. It's very uncomfortable for you.
No, Dave.
That's
a great point, sir.
As you were talking about the options, either you can have a plan or the government can have a plan. In your line of work, have you ever come across statistics or a percentage in terms of how many people and what percentage of people really do because they had no plan, just leave it up to the government to figure it out?
You ready for this? This was based on a study done by Washington State University. And they said, this is maybe about a 15-year-old study. It said 4% of Americans have an estate plan that will work. And they said 1 in 5 have an estate plan. 1 in 5. And then
that may or may not work.
1 in 5, and then 1 in 5 of the 1 in 5 will actually work. And when they said work, they defined work that the plan will actually do what you thought it was going to do.
Right.
Let me give you an example. Everybody here says, you need a living trust, you need a revocable living trust, you need a living trust, all right? So all these attorneys, or you go online, LegalZoom, wherever, you get a revocable living trust. That doesn't work if you don't fund it. So it's not enough that you get the trust. You then need to transfer your assets to the trust.
Yeah, right.
And such a high percentage of people don't do that. People do estate plans, and then they don't keep them up to date. So the laws change, their family changes, their health changes, and their finances change. And as those things change, those change what their intentions would be. So there's another example of why plans might not work. So, yeah, that's the last statistic I was aware of.
So about 80. So that you said 1 in 5 have a
plan. 1
in
5, and then 1 in 5. So 4%.
So 80%.
20% have it. 80% don't.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, and the challenge is when we have to rely on the government's rules, they're better than nothing. But when we have to rely on the government's rules, it means that we have to rely on the legal system, the courts, the lawyers, and not that we're all bad, but it is cumbersome, it is costly, and it is timely. It takes a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of frustration for family members. And again, that alone should be enough to motivate people to say, and it's not estate planning. I mean, here's another example. Estate planning is not only about who's in control, but it's about making sure that what you have gets to whom you want, when you want, the way that you want. Do you want to give money to a child who's, may have a drug addiction? You could kill them if you give them, if you die and they get 1/3 of your estate, that may be enough money to kill them because they're just going to overdose. And I've seen it happen. I wouldn't be saying this, but I've seen it happen. Where today, it was easy in the old days. You lived and you died. Today, you die and stuff goes to your kids. It could be a death sentence. I mean, and I'm not to scare, but I mean, this is the ramifications of not planning sometimes. The other part of it is asset protection. Some people say, I've worked my whole life for what I have. How do I protect it? Protect it from long-term care costs, protect it from creditors, protect it from my kids' spouses in divorce, protect it from all the different things, lawyers, right, lawsuits. These are things people want to protect. And that's another reason why people should be doing estate planning, to protect the things that they've worked their entire life for. And that's what it's about. It's no different than all the other things we do in life. It's just one more thing to add to our list. A large majority of our clients go with on what's called a maintenance program. Once they do their plan, they get updates from us every year. When the law changes, they get to update their estate plan whenever they want to change family needs. But a good estate plan will become part of your life, like your financial planning, your estate planning. You review it, every so often to make sure it's still what you want. Like, for example, 2019, December, just a little less than a year ago, the Secure Act was passed. The Secure Act extremely modified rules around retirement accounts, 401ks, IRAs, and the like. It used to be, before last year, that when you died, you can leave your retirement accounts to your children or loved ones, and they can take that over their lifetimes. Now the government changed that and forces that IRA out over a 10-year period. So in the old days, just a year ago, if you had a large IRA, that could be distributed to your children over their lifetimes and minimize the taxation. Now these IRAs are forced to be paid out over a 10-year period, which then increases typically the tax rate that you're paying on those. And more importantly, it eliminates the asset protection. So, for example, if someone has an IRA, it may not necessarily be protected from long-term care costs. It may not be, there's a U.S. Supreme Court case, Clark v. Remacher, 2005, that said inherited IRAs are not protected. And so, what happens with these large IRAs that people have, they want to leave to their family members? Well, there are strategies and planning that you can do that protects the IRAs now from long-term care costs of your spouse and others, from lawsuits and creditors and predators, and allows your children to take it out over the 10 years or longer through different strategies. So it's about protection. It's about, making sure you're in control. That's the primary one. But also about making sure you protect what you work for, and also make sure you protect your children while you're here and after you're gone.
Well, Dave, I think a lot of us have thought about a lot of this, and I think we've covered a lot of great topics and scenarios. But before we wrap, is there something specific, and again, just thinking of this pandemic, what we're all going through, maybe a different way of thinking, a different way of planning, what are people asking about during this pandemic? Is there something specific that may be a little different from the past or prior to all this?
If I had to say, I would say it's the uncertainty, right? And so COVID has brought an uncertainty to everything. And it's done two things. It's brought an uncertainty to people around their health and what if something happened. And believe it or not, many people are finding solace in doing their planning, because they're like, okay, at least now I feel like I have some element of impact, right? So that's really the one side of it, is preparing and feeling like they have some element of control, as you were talking about earlier, some element of satisfaction to know, okay, this is set now. That's one thing now I can say I've actually done affirmatively and minimized the nonsense that could happen. The second part has really become the protection. People, especially with the election, people are feeling very vulnerable, and on both sides of the aisle. It doesn't really matter what side you're on. They're both feeling vulnerable, and there's a dire need for people to want to protect what they have. And so when you're able to do both of those things in planning, I think bottom line, it's giving people some peace of mind during this very turbulent time.
So, Dave, before we let you go, we have a quick question from one of the listeners. And I guess it's a good point here. They want to know if you have any suggestions about how to start the sensitive conversation about wills or trusts or whatever estates with an elderly parent or parents.
I tell you, that's a great question. It's sensitive for kids. We call us the sandwich generation. We've got parents we're taking care of and kids we're taking care of. The best thing is, especially with the holidays coming up, you got Thanksgiving coming up, Christmas. These are great times to have these conversations. And here's really where I would couch the conversation. I would really talk about those things we mentioned today about control and protection, And really, the other part of it is about their ability to stay home. And maybe you frame it this way. I was listening to that guy on the radio, and he was saying, it's really quite simple to ensure you never go into a nursing home. It's a lot easier to plan. If you go and plan for it, I could tell you, honestly, very few of our clients go into nursing homes. Over the last 10 years, the number has dropped dramatically. I'd say 1 in 10, where before 10 in 10 would go, and I'd say 1 in 10 going now, because we have so many more options. And the challenge is for people, particularly the elderly, they're afraid. What they're afraid of is that they're going to be, they're afraid that their autonomy is going to be taken away. And it's quite the opposite. I think you assure them that it's about maintaining their autonomy and making sure they stay in control, and that they get to set the plan now so that they know they never have to go in a nursing home. And there's so many other options to care for individuals now that do not require nursing home. Now, extreme measures do if you have extreme health issues, but most people can be maintained at home for a very, very, very long time, in most cases right up till natural death. And that's really what it's about, giving them confidence that it's about keeping them in control, and it's about giving them the option so they never have to be forced into a nursing home or forced into losing all their assets because of the lack of planning. So in this case, it's actually lack of knowledge does hurt you. But getting a little bit of knowledge, and here's the key thing, they don't have to do anything. Tell them. Like, for example, you all know we do the workshops. They don't have to do a thing. They never even have to come in and see us. If they just come into the workshop and learn about it, or we have them available online if you want to watch them online, they're great things to educate. Education empowers people. It keeps them in control. And I think that's really the approach. You want to give them confidence and then reassure their autonomy. I think that's what they're looking for the most.
Mm-hmm. Dave, always a pleasure to speak with you and about these topics. And if folks want to find out more, maybe learn more about those workshops, how do they do that?
Well, at the law office, we're right next door to Home Depot Estate Planning Law Center, 555 French Road. 315-793-3622 is the number, or eplawcenter.com. You can go online. You could request a copy of the workshop. A link will be sent to you. You can even schedule your own appointment, or you can find out other general information, eplawcenter.com or 315-793-3622.
Dave, thanks. You're the best. We'll speak to you next month, and stay safe, stay healthy, and thanks again for the time.